In this video, I'm going to be going over the class activity 14, which is just looking at methods part 3. So now in this actual assignment, we're going to start with what we had from part 2, and we're going to go ahead and modify it, and we're going to add in some functionality. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the code here. All right, so now coming back to this code and actually seeing our movie simulation part 2 working, we now have where we see our movie details here. We also have where we see our initial seating, where we have all the unavailable seats, and then now we have here where we actually are randomly populating where the seats are available and not available. So what we next want to do is in our main method, we're just going to check to make sure we have all the information. So we set up our arrays, we have our constant variables here, so that's good. The next thing is we call our display movie details function, passing in these arrays as arguments into the function, movie name, movie genre, movie prices, and then we set our availability. Now, afterwards, what we want to do is actually call a selectMovie function. So we want to actually add that in there. So we're going to place it right after this. This is where our setMovie built-in function, oops, Java, our setMovie built-in function is going to be at. So that call, and we know that we're going to pass in movie names as the array. Um, and even reading the instructions, another aspect of this is it's going to return an index. So we know that we're going to need to have a variable, um, oops, yes, a variable that is going to be of int type here. And we're just going to label it index. All right, so now still going through the instructions here. The next thing we want to do is then we call a displaySelectedMovie function. So that means we have to add in some functionality. So we're going to call displaySelectedMovie function, and we want to pass in movie names with the index. We want to pass in the movie genre with the index. And we also want to pass in the movie prices with the index as well. Now we're going to end that with a semicolon, both of them. All right. So now the next part of this is in the instructions. It tells us to call um, the randomize availability function there. So we know that this is the next function that we're going to need to call. And then lastly, we're going to also call the display availability with our movie availability in there. So we're going to call that as well. And so for the rest of this, we can just get rid of this part. We can also get rid of this part. And we may just have to, update our um, set availability. We'll also get rid of our set availability here. So we have display, then we would have this. We're going to get rid of this as well. All right. So now that we have that, the next thing we need to do is actually create the functions that we have here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right here at the top. So the first one is going to still be static because we want to update the values regardless. It's going to return an integer. So we have the int type. And then we call the select movie with our string array. And we're just going to name it in this function names. So this function here takes We have our static int select movie string names. This function is going to take some value, and I'm just going to go ahead and return 0 just to get it from being weird to start off with. So we take in our set movie, or this should be select movie function, and then we know that it returns some value here. So now that we have this, the next thing we want to do is actually use our scanner instance, because this is where we're going to have the user actually select a movie. So we're going to do that right here. We're going to do scanner equals scanner, new scanner. Oops, forgot my equal sign here. And we're just going to let them know that we want to get it from the console. Scanner equals new scanner. And then afterwards, what we'll actually do, we have to make sure we import it at the top. So just like how we have this, we're just going to do import java.util.scanner. All right. So now we have this that's unused at the present. Now the next thing we want to do is just create a stringed variable that when the user selects the movie, that it gets stored in there. So we're just going to create an empty string variable here. And then what we're going to do is start with our while loop. And we're just going to say while true. So while this is true, then we're just going to print out something here. We're just going to say enter, and we want it to be on a new line. Enter the movie name you are purchasing tickets for, colon. And then the next thing we're going to do on this line here is we want to let this be what they enter in. So we're going to say selected movie equals, we're going to use our scanner instance or scanner object, and we're going to do dot next line. All right, so now the next thing we're going to do is just create a for loop so that we can kind of iterate through our array that gets passed in. So in the for loop, we're going to start the index at 0. And we're just going to make the condition be as long as we get through the length of the array that gets passed in here, then that's fine. So that's our condition, is the length of the array of the names of the movie. So we know, at least for us, our movie name has 4 items in it, so it's length 4. Okay, inside of this for loop here, we're going to have an if statement. Now this if statement is going to help us actually check to see the user's input. So you can refer back to comparing strings, earlier assignments. So here we have our selected movie, whatever the user entered in. And then here we're just going to check to see if it's equal to specific name inside of the array that we passed in. So we're using that I index from our for loop here. Now in this way, what's going to happen is it's going to search through the list. If it actually finds it, then it's equal. And we're just going to do scanner.close. So we don't need close anymore, or we don't need scanner anymore. And then we're just going to return the index of where that is specifically located inside of the array that gets passed in. Then after this, what we're going to actually have here is we are just saying here, movie not found. Please try again. Hence why we used our while loop, because it'll just allow for it to keep running until we no longer need it. So that's pretty much it. We want to check to make sure everything is in the right way. And so that's the select movie function here. Now, the next function that we have to work on is actually going to be our display movie function. Display selected movie function. So I'm going to go ahead and place that here. And we know that we want it to be static. We're not going to return anything, and we're just going to name it display selected movie. We're going to pass in a string here for the name, because if you notice when we call this function, we use the index that's returned here to actually pass in the array with that specific index. So let's say it's index 1 or 0 rather, then it's going to return Great Gatsby, drama romance, 15.25 here because we're using the index, all right? So now that we have this, we know that it's not going to be passing an array, but a specific item in that array. So that's why we have string name for The Great Gatsby, if that was what we picked. Then we have string genre for drama romance, and then we have double price, and that's just for the price of the tickets. Now, we're going to make sure that we set it up right. Everything looks good. So now the next thing we want to do is just have our header. So we're just going to print, and I already have a built-in function inside of my code that just allows for a header to be printed, but you do not need to do that. You can just do the dashes to print and then just have your percentages here. It's completely up to you. But for me, I'm just gonna pass in this as the header. In fact, let me just go ahead and do it in the way that you would need. Let's see here. All right. So here we have this, and I got dash. What I'm gonna put here in the text instead, we'll place 19 as the value that I want to repeat. And then we're gonna have string text here. And this is just gonna be make it capital movie selection here. Okay. All right, so we have our dashes. We will have the dash to the left, the dash to the right, and then the text will be movie selection here. All right, so now that we have this part where it's just for the header, now let's go ahead and move on but move on to the next part of it, which is being able to display out the correct information. So we're going to use our display selected movie. All right, so here we're just going to do system.out.printf. We're going to have that percent dash 20, percent dash 20s, percent s. Oops, forgot to put that in a string because that's for formatting. So we want our 20s to be for our string for our movie name. We want the 20s to be for our string for a movie genre. We want the S for our movie prices, and we're just going to make sure that there's a new line here. So the next part is just going to be the header for the actual title. So we're going to put here movie name, comma, do genre, comma, movie price. Okay. So essentially what happens here is, and don't put this in, this will automatically populate if you're using a different platform, but the movie name is going to be placeholder for this string, genre placeholder for this string, and movie price placeholder for this string. Then we have a new line. Now the next thing we're going to do over here is also, um, okay, they don't have it. We'll just go ahead and do it ourselves. System.out.printf. Now here, what we're going to also do is have our string format. So we're going to have our percent dash 20s for our name. So we're going to go ahead and put the name that we passed in here. Now we're getting to the actual data. Now the next part here we're going to do is we're going to have our percent dash 20s here. And this is going to be for our genre. And then lastly, we're going to have our price. And so how we do that is we're going to put our money symbol here, then put the percent symbol so that it placeholds that. Then we're going to say we want it to be 10 floating spaces. And then we're going to say we want it to be two floating points. And then we're going to put price here and make sure we end it with a semicolon. And so this is what the display selected movie would do. All right. So now that we have this done, we've actually kind of completed what we wanted to do. So we're going to uncomment this out. And yep, uh, oops, definitely not sure what happened there. Oh, okay. I see. Yeah, so I just need to spell it right. Just make sure I put the I in there. All right. And then now it should work. So I'm going to run this just to check to see now what it looks like. Ooh, okay, syntax error. Let's go ahead and debug this. I forgot to put my semicolon at the end. All right, let's run it. All right. Okay. So now when we zoom in here, we see our movie details gets displayed. Now we're going to go ahead and we want to go ahead and put the great, and we're going to test to see if it works. Okay, it says it's not found and allows us to actually enter it back in. So we're going to go ahead and try our hand at it. The great Gatsby here. Then now it shows us the specific information here, the seating availability. So we are now at a position in here where we have completed this portion, but we still have one more section um, that we want to work with, which is also just displaying it out where we can see the seat number for the user to, if they wanted to, pick a ticket if they need it. So how we go about that is we need to go and edit our display availability function. So let's go ahead and do that. So display availability. All right, here we go. So in this display availability function here, we see that we have our nested for loop and we also have our header here. Before the header, what we're actually going to do is just create a list of characters. So we're going to have our chart type, the character symbol, and just say this is the row label. And then we're just going to create an array for this. So we're going to do A, comma, B, comma, C, comma, D, comma, E. All right. And then next thing we're going to do is we want to be able to print our header for available seats, um, which we already have here. But let's go ahead and just do that. And we'll just make this 18 here. And again, we will create a text here, a stringed text. And we're just going to have this say available seats. Okay. And so that gets stored here. So we have our header, code, and now we have here our character array. Okay, so now that we have our character array, what we want to do now, since this is meant to be for the row to say A1, A2, we now need to focus on how can we actually place numbers for it to, instead of just displaying out this, we have A1, A2 is available type of thing that they can pick. So here inside of our for loop, we're going to place after this to be able to print the column headers from 1 to 10. We're going to just have our for loop. So I'm going to just say for int c, and we're going to start this at 1. So we have row 1, or column 1 rather. Int c equals 1, and then we have c is less than, and we're just going to use the array name there, avail, and we're going to just say based off of the row, the length of that row is how long we are actually going to be running through this condition. Or in this case, sorry, the length of that. So the length is the column rather. And so here we're going to do the C++. So we're going to add 1 to that each time. So we're going to go the whole length of the column going down, starting at 1. And then now here, what we're going to do is just put our system.out print. And instead of using println, we're going to just use printf. And here I'm just going to have a space and then put %d for a decimal and then put comma c, or an integer rather, and then put comma c. Again, you do not need to put format. It will automatically populate depending on the IDE you're using. So now this should print out the actual column, and how we actually get the new line for each one is here. We're now going to print line. So this is using format print, and this is using println. All right. So now that we have our column and we have our row here, we need to actually add in our row. So what we're going to do here is right in between our nested for loop that we've had prior, inside our outer for loop here, we're just going to print out a formatted print statement. And this one, we're just going to say %c for our characters, colon, or I mean a pipe symbol, which is right above your enter key. So shift enter. Then we're going to, outside of the quotes, do comma and then do row, label, and based off of I, because that one I, we know the outer for loop is keeping track of the row. That's going to be the row for that specific column. And then here we have for I and j, for j equals 0, j is less than I dot length. This is good. But right here in the printout, this is where we're going to change it up a bit. So we're actually going to use our printf, the format printing, and we're going to get rid of this part. And in front of this, we're actually going to put that %c there and then comma. So pretty much wherever the availability is, we're going to place that specific character where it should be there, since all of what's inside of there is character basically. And then you want to make sure you have your println afterwards so that they're all on a new line. Modify to print %c to print row. All right. So now we are actually fully done. Let's go ahead and test to make sure that things are working well. So we're going to go ahead and run this. And now you see here, okay, let me run it again to be more normal here. All right. You see, enter the movie that you're purchasing. We want to do The Great Gatsby. Oops, don't have a space there, enter. Then it also places that in there. And then now we see, okay, we have A, B, C, D, E for, this seat. And then we have row 1, 2 to 9. And so for this, you would just want to format it so that it's actually placed the way that you would like. I think the main thing that I'm seeing is just that There just needs to be like a space here between C and this part. There needs to be a space there. So now let me go ahead and rerun it. And we're gonna just try 4 lines. And then we see here, okay, it's now spread out a bit more. So it's completely up to you how you want to display it out or how you even want to work through this process. However, this is all that the instructions, or at least all of that. And here again is where we probably should add another space as well. So we'll do Europa report. All right, so yeah, you just want to fix it up a tiny bit to just be adjusted to whatever you would like, but this is pretty much just how you work on, or this is how it should look. Yeah. All right, so I hope that this video helped you. I hope that it helped you at least understand a little bit more how to code. Let me know if you have any questions. Take care.